Welcome everyone. Welcome everyone to EEAC's second Skillshare. Our theme for the day is all about how do we build successful partnerships and collaborations, whether that's between schools and non-formal education organizations, larger institutions, nonprofits working together. There's so many ways we can work together. And when I think about all of these massive issues that we're facing as a society, the climate crisis being one that comes to mind as an environmental organization, there's no way that we can address these problems without working in collaboration. And so building successful partnerships is critical for all of the work that we do. And we are so grateful to have two presenters here today, which I'll introduce in a little bit, but I'd like to start off with having everyone throw their, rename yourself in the chat. So you can do that by clicking on participants and going to more and then rename. That's me. So I'm actually going to rename myself now, which I realized I didn't do. I am from Solar One and I'm also part of EEAC. So please take a moment to do that. And welcome everybody. Welcome. We have a bunch more people joining. Great. So our agenda for today, we are going to have two 10 to 15-minute presentations. We will have some timekeeping. There'll be a little bit of time for Q&A from our audience. And then we're going to close out with a group discussion about how do we collaborate to address pressing global problems. And specifically, being here representing EEAC, we want to talk about how we as a network can help promote this type of work. And finally, we're going to close out with how we can get involved, how everyone can get more involved in EEAC. This is our mission statement. The Environmental Education Advisory Council of New York City. You guys can read that. I'm not going to read straight from a slide, but we are a member-based organization. And if you're not already a member, we really hope that you will join. You may have seen an option to join when you registered for this event, and we'll continue to share that afterwards. We also have lots of opportunities to volunteer, which we'll share a volunteer link after this. So when we started this series of Skillshare events, we sort of committed to doing some, like, I don't remember how many we committed to for this year, but we're on the second one. And this didn't come out of nowhere. Some of the steering committee members at EEAC really spent a significant amount of time working on a very robust strategic plan for our organization. I cannot take credit for that. I don't know if anyone is here from the strategic planning committee, so I can shout them out. But part of that process was interviewing stakeholders, and stakeholders include our membership, but also include, schools, really anyone working in environmental education in New York City. And these were just two quotes that popped out from those stakeholder interviews that really get to the heart of part of why we're doing this. We really do need more partnerships. There are these gaps, and it's something we as an organization want to help to facilitate, but we also want to leverage the expertise of our members, which is part of why we have two phenomenal presenters working with us here today. So our two presenters, we're going to be starting with the Rockaway Institute for Sustainable Development, and then our second presentation will be from High School for Climate Justice. And with that, I am going to pass the mic to Rise. We'll let you guys take over. Please introduce yourselves and Rise. And we are at 3:40. So at 3:55, we'll be switching.
Awesome. Yeah, Sarah, if you can help us keep on time, that would be fantastic. So let me share my screen. Can you guys see that okay? Yeah, excellent. All right. So my name is Anna. I am a community-based planner. I have my own consulting firm, Anafisa Consulting, and I worked with RISE for many, many years. And we're going to present on this project. And Judah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm Judah Asimov, Senior Manager and Planning and Outreach at RISE. And we're going to be talking about our Greater Rockaway Community Shoreline Enhancement Plan. So first, just to give a little introduction to RISE's mission, we actually stand for Rockaway Initiative for Sustainability and Equity. Don't worry, there have been lots of confusions along the way. But our mission is to empower all generations of Rockaway residents to care for their environment and community. We provide civic engagement and youth development programs with the goal of advancing social equity and the physical well-being of the Rockaways. Our civic engagement programs include volunteer and advocacy initiatives, particularly plantings and cleanups. Our youth programs focus on STEM and leadership development. We were founded in 2005 as Rockaway Waterfront Alliance, but in 2019, we transitioned to RISE to more explicitly center social equity in our name and mission. And a growing sphere of our work is in the planning and advocacy sector. Our campaigns tend to be led by students and local residents and are rooted in our history of cleanups, plantings, and volunteerism. And we'll come back to that in a little bit. Next slide, please, Anna. And so the Greater Rockaway Community and Shoreline Enhancement Plan, it was funded by the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, and it aims to build on city, state, federal, and nonprofit existing plans with the goal of conducting a comprehensive site assessment to develop a preliminary design to enhance the shoreline, the Atlantic shoreline of the Rockaways, into an extensive, biodiverse, and habitat-rich system with providing flood protections and economic opportunities for residents, with local voices and youth voices at the center of all this. Next slide. So for those of you who don't know, the Rockaways is an 11-mile-long peninsula located in southeastern Queens, surrounded on 3 sides by water. Our plan focuses on the Atlantic side, an area that's about 42 acres. You can see that green sinuous line is the boardwalk. We're mostly focused on the dunes north of the boardwalk. We'll come back to that again a little bit later. Next slide. And then we were lucky to be able to hire a diverse team of professionals in engagement, engineering, and design to work with us on this exciting project. Now I'm going to turn it over to Anna.
I'll talk a little bit more about how we're actually working on this. So we, in planning the project, really understood that for us to address anything in terms of the environmental, we also had to focus on the equity and economic needs of the community. So we heard from the community that we had to market the environmental wonders of the area for people to truly appreciate it. But at the same time that we had to intentionally be very intentional about who we engaged in the project. And of course, we targeted engaging young people and communities of color in the process, and supporting leadership in the local community who are more likely to support the project if they work to build it. So there's this quote about the Detroit mantra, we built this. And that this project and really being able to touch in those three areas, how to address the needs of the young people, particularly around the high unemployment, and understanding that Rockaway was really impacted by COVID-19, and we had astronomical economic impacts due to the pandemic, and that we're building on a history of environmental racism and inequitable distribution of resources. So sorry about that. I had some racing motorcycles in the background. So to guide this work, we worked closely with 14 high school students in RISE's Short Corps who developed a manifesto for the project. And that served as kind of a grading metrics for the project and the work that came out of the process. And we actually engaged the 14 high school students in a number of ways. They received training on successful ecological restorations. A lot of our project team members were engaged in monthly meetings with the students to in this trainings. We learned about the Green New Deal. We engaged the professionals like ecologist Stephen Handel and Mike Feller in the trainings. All the team members, as I mentioned, were talked about their career pathways and shared their story of how they got involved in their careers. And we also incorporated mental health aspects in the workshops, understanding that this work is, is in the context of COVID-19. There's a lot of impacts. Students are working from home, and there's kind of underlying crises that we were dealing with. So we met monthly for 9 months, allowing us to build long relationship with the students, and students presented and worked with us in the community design workshops and helped with planting plans, and we're involved in a tour with Mike Feller and Design Dynamics, which are an environmental design firm. And here's the second part of the manifesto. So some of the kind of the emerging opportunities that came out of the process were around community-led stewardship, wayfinding signage, workforce training and youth employment, boardwalk entrepreneurship. There's a plant nursery that we're developing in collaboration with developers and New York City Parks and ecotourism. So we worked with different partners in very different ways. We had very different ways for people to engage in the process at their own capacity. But at the core, we had our project team, our National Fish and Wildlife Foundation, who are a funder, New York City public agencies, particularly parks and HPD, and they kind of formed the core of the team. Then we had a steering committee composed of the project team, New York City public agencies, the Army Corps that are doing a really extensive project in developing out the groins, and they're going to be reformulating the dunes on the ocean side. The steering committee also included a number of civic associations, community-based organizations, business owners, youth development organizations, and developers. But we also were engaged the larger community through a number of ways, including interviews, focus groups, particularly we were used the focus groups to engage communities that we were finding were not getting engaged in the process. So we've targeted NYCHA residents, and then also technical advisors. We also did a number of community design workshops, the short core training that I kind of covered, and survey and social media for the project. So that just kind of give you like a rough overview, and I'll stop sharing. So I think we're going to kind of use this opportunity just to be in conversation with each other. And Judah, could you talk a little bit about kind of RISE's approach to collaboration? Because I know you guys used to be a Rockaway Waterfront Alliance. So I just want to hear from you about how you work and partner.
Well, I think one of the key things in the Rockaways is Sandy. For those who don't know, it devastated the peninsula. And I think a lot of RISE's history of collaboration came out of that time, that kind of volunteerism where, people from all over the peninsula and people came into the Rockaways to help with cleanups, with plantings, with food distribution. And this kind of, for us, helped rooted the importance of social connections built through volunteerism as a way to build connections and collaboration. So RISE, through these kind of efforts, has these deep roots, which came to play a key part in this project.
And then how would you say that you worked with all these groups? Because there are so many different stakeholders. And I know I mentioned a little bit about how we engaged, but were there any challenges that you found in the process?
Yes, I think one of the key challenges that Anna touched on a little bit was working with the Army Corps of Engineers. They were basically told us to focus on the area north of the boardwalk, which at first was a little bit disappointing, but kind of ended up being in some ways a blessing. The north of the dunes and sand north of the boardwalk. If you've ever been to the beach, you know that you never think about the area north of the boardwalk. Nobody's sunbathing there. So this is really this forgotten area where there's really opportunities to kind of go wild, where nobody feels kind of protective of this area. There's opportunities for young people to get involved, for residents, for everyone. So I think that ended up being a blessing in some ways. And then there's always kind of issues in working with in the Rockaways, as I'm sure many of you have found in your neighborhoods and catchment areas. The Rockaways is pretty segregated along economic and racial lines. So we really wanted to find a way to work with all residents, but really make sure we were centering the voices that are often left out. Immigrants, young people, people of color, low income residents, renters. So we really created a lot of kind of extra opportunities for collaboration focused just on these populations. Our short course sessions, our surveys in multiple languages, a special kind of focus group just for NYCHA residents. And I think that really was a key aspect.
I think just building on what Judah said, I think what's so unique about this project is because it's driven as a planning project and as an environmental engineering project is driven by a youth development organization. So there's a really, I think, really interesting ways that if there are populations that you want to build into projects, having those organizations drive the process. And I know we have a number of environmental organizations youth development organizations on the call. Like there's a lot of power in having you drive the process, find the funding, getting the partners together, getting the team that, your dream team together, and kind of, driving the conversation rather than waiting for that funding to come to you or having other partners bring it to you. So I think that's kind of a really unique part of that. And then I know we touched on this a little bit, but Judy, could you talk a little bit about how youth were important to the project and how they were involved, and maybe talk a little bit about how they're involved in kind of the larger RISE framework?
Right. So at RISE, we like to think the youth are kind of involved in everything we do. A key part of our programs around youth leadership. So we saw this as an opportunity for the young people to really be involved. So with the manifesto Anna showed, that was one of the first parts of the project and really kind of geared everything we did. One thing that was really exciting is we have Anna and then some of the amazing other partners in environmental engineering and in architecture, who really on almost a monthly to every other week basis, really kind of in small groups, were able to work closely with ShoreCorps to get to know the students, share their experiences, and also really, I think, glean for kind of the project team what is important to the young people. Anna, do you have anything else you'd like to add? Anna did a great job really coming up with the curriculum for that part of the project.
Thanks, Judah. I think we wanted to open it up to questions. I don't know how we're doing on time, Sarah, but if you guys had any questions.
Yes, we have 1 minute and then we'd love to
great.
do some Q&A. Do you have any final thoughts before we move to the questions?
I think we
Oh, froze at just
Oh my gosh.
just the wrong moment.
That was a crazy timing. Oh, you just froze, but you're back.
Oh, sorry about that. Maybe it's funny because this part of the backyard has really good Wi-Fi. So I think one of the core things I want to emphasize is when you're building out projects and partnerships, allowing people, organizations to engage in different ways. Because I think a lot of times, there's, especially in Rockaway, A lot of civic associations have very different capacities. A lot of youth development organizations have different capacities. A lot of residents have different capacities, right? Some people are working 2-3 jobs. So allowing people to get excited about the project, but allowing them to engage and have ownership in the project in multiple ways is really, really critical. So yeah, I think kind of having a plurality of engagement strategies is really important. So I think I just wanted to emphasize that. But yeah, we'll open it to the group if you guys have questions for us.
Thank you so much. This is really inspirational. There's one question in the chat from River, if you all can see that.
Sarah, do you want me to read the question first?
I
guess
can read
everybody
it out.
can see it.
Yeah, everyone can see it. It's just asking about if some of the community partnerships that were formed after Sandy were active during the height of COVID, when folks became more dependent on neighbors. That's a great question.
I think so. You know, in the Rockaways, there was, actually, I think we saw it pretty much throughout New York City. There was these mutual aid networks that formed quickly. But I do think the one in the Rockaways was able to form especially quickly because there were already these networks that had been engaged before, so they could kind of really quickly be deployed. I think a lot more of some of the NYCHA developments or other of the, I guess, larger high rises, you know, they knew from their Sandy experience that, yes, it was important to know, you know, Mrs. Jones on the 4th floor is going to need help, or Mr. Smith is not going to be able to get the food or medicine he needs. So it was great to see that could be deployed a lot faster.
And then we had another question from Alyssa. How much of our partnership engagement was deliberate and planned ahead of time versus emergent and unexpected? And I think there was, I think, a healthy and good balance between kind of understanding that we definitely knew we wanted to do a survey. We knew we wanted to do community design workshops. We knew we wanted to work with students. But to be honest, it was a really beautiful evolution of setting the agenda for those meetings. And the focus groups we left open because we wanted to have some space to engage populations that we might have been missing, which was really, I think, I guess using the kind of iterative design process to allow enough space for you to course correct and adjust as the project progressed was really important. It was really actually incredible and really beautiful to see how much of the same themes were coming up in our design workshops and our surveys and our discussions with the students. So there was kind of this kind of natural bubbling up of themes and projects, which is really incredible, which I was very surprised because I was like, I expected a little bit more, a little bit more like butting heads or, different priorities, but it was really incredible how things were aligned and we were engaging, different people in different ways. So it was really interesting to see how that kind of flowed. Yeah. Great.
That is phenomenal. I'm very inspired by this project. I guess I have one more question before we move on to the next presentation. We have like 1 minute left, but I'm wondering, in your work and engaging with youth, how receptive do you feel that the larger institutional partners were to feedback from youth? And do you think that, it made their contributions were really taken to heart into how decisions were made, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, I think the answer is yes. I wish we had some of our other consultants on just so that we could ask them how they imagined the level of engagement would be from the high schoolers versus how it actually was, because I think the students are so amazing. They kind of blew everything out of the water, that, they were so engaged and so excited that it was almost impossible for anybody to ignore them. And, one thing we often find is that something along those lines happens and, there's fights between different populations or people who have adults who have different ideas, and just kind of a seeing the young people there, or even just hearing the perspective from a young person kind of quiets some of those disagreements.
Yeah, and I think what was also, I think, really integral is that one, the students that we work with had been working with RISE through kind of their pathway of workshops. They start with learning about environmental justice, then they learn about food justice, then they learn about urban planning. They also have, RISE has this incredible program called Environmentor, where they engage with field scientists working on Jamaica Bay and on in the waters around Rockaway, doing everything from research on bottlenose dolphins to oysters to wetlands. So the students that we had involved in the project were really, really primed and very well educated through this, these pathways that RISE developed. So that was and they were baked in. What they said was completely baked into the development of the plan, as any community would be. But because they were engaged throughout and completely integrated, there was no question about, well, these are just kids talking. It's like they are really, leading this conversation. So I think that was really incredible and really important.
That's phenomenal. I really feel like, there's such a big focus on culturally responsive teaching and really like being able to learn from youth, not just have teachers teaching at youth. And I feel like this is like the finest example of that. So I wanted to acknowledge there's one more question in the chat, but also just to keep time, we have to move on to the next presentation now. So I'm hoping, first of all, thank you, Anna and Judah, for being here and for sharing. I'm so inspired. I'm hoping at least one of you can stick around and take maybe some more questions towards the end.
Happy to do that.
Thank you.
And I could probably, do you want me to answer that question now, or do you want me to hold on off?
Either answer in the chat. I want to keep
great.
us going for our next presentation. Answer in the chat, or we can have more questions at the end for sure. So now I would like to introduce, yes, thank you, our next presenters. They are from a high school that's changing names, High School for Climate Justice. So I'd like to welcome Alyssa and Stephen from High School for Climate Justice. I will hand it over to you.
Great. Thank you so much for having us. And Anna and Judah, thank you for your presentation. As a Queens resident, I often go to Rockaways, so I'm glad to hear that the work being done. But I do work, I'm the assistant principal at Life Sciences High School, which is going to be the High School for Climate Justice. And we'll talk a little bit about that in just a minute. So I'm the assistant principal, and I'm here with a colleague who I'll let introduce herself.
Sure, my name is Alyssa Levy, she, her pronouns. I guess I'll jump to this slide anyway, because we're introducing ourselves. I teach physics and computer science. I'm also the coach of our green team at our high school.
Great. And so we're located actually in Manhattan on 96th and 1st Avenue, right off the FDR. We have approximately 400 students in grades 9 through 12. And as of July 1st, we are going to be called the High School for Climate Justice. The big thing there is that this was a months-long collaborative kind of name change process that had multiple stakeholders, the students, the staff, the families, our district level, kind of talking about where we wanted to be. And we had two names in the running, and that was Life Sciences High School and the High School for Climate Justice. And the High School for Climate Justice won by a landslide, actually, on the final vote. And that, I think, is because the school over the years has been changing. And that has been that student voice and equity has really been at the forefront. And so we wanted to kind of pay homage to the history of the life science and the sciences, but also recognize that we're a very active school with our voice. And so we landed on the High School for Climate Justice. So that being said, we're not in this alone, which is why we're here talking kind of about partnering. And so we want to honor that theme of climate justice, and we're trying to build capacity at our school currently. And so we'll talk a little bit about that.
We, as Steve said, became or agreed back in March that we were going to become the high school for climate justice. And so immediately started thinking, who are we going to work with, right? How are we going to make this happen? Because it is neither desirable nor possible for a group of high school teachers in a small school in Manhattan to really educate the next generation of advocates and people who are going to fix our climate problem. So we started thinking about, how do we form partnerships? And so we started off by casting a very wide net. And we're still, reaching out with questions to new partners, but we've done a lot of our casting a wide net really back in March and April. A combination of teachers and our APs attended every single climate education webinar we could possibly find. I think I estimated 100 hours, but that's too much. I did spend about 50 hours in climate related webinars during the past school year. 50 is an accurate estimate. Emailed everyone we knew, Googled for climate organizations, right? Found everything we could and reached out to people. And so really we're talking about like, what was our journey to form the partnerships that we have, and what are we still doing? And then please do ask questions in the chat, or afterwards we can talk about, how do we continue to partner, and what do we take away from this? So after we cast that wide net, we did meet and consolidate, right? A lot of emails, hey, so-and-so told me you might be a good person to meet with about this thing. We did a lot of introductory Zooms. We applied to a bunch of grants we'd heard about and brought some professional development in-house to our teachers. Then it's a stick with what sticks, because some people, either the organization is defunct and we didn't realize it, or they weren't able to respond to emails, or there wasn't a connection. And so for the partnerships where it seemed like something was really budding and about to grow, we started pilot programs with certain groups within the school. And also there's a lot of pockets where teachers in our building are just doing awesome things with climate organizations. And so I know, or I hope Steve would agree, I'm speaking on my boss's behalf now, but you can't do everything as the school leader, right? You need to delegate to teachers and give them the freedom to build partnerships themselves. And so we're doing all of these things still, but we're moving ever so much towards implement and refine, where we've got specific goals within the space of climate justice, and we're creating and building out curricula and working in an interdisciplinary way on those partnerships.
And so we just wanted to kind of highlight some of those organizations we've been working with these past few months, and we're trying to solidify and sustain. And so we kind of bucketed them for you just to kind of think about. But this is helping us also as teachers kind of have a potpourri of organizations as they're thinking about their after school activities, their clubs, their classroom units, curriculums, and lessons. And so we're really kind of focusing, because it's that justice piece and equity, is youth lobbying and activism, which I won't speak to all of them as organizations, but we did link them and we can share the PowerPoint. And so if you'd like those as well. Our teachers are working very diligently actually on interdisciplinary curricula. And that I think is actually, a benefit of, the COVID era. Because the tests weren't such a focus, we had time to really nurture some of the things we really want to do as educators. So that was happening. Computer simulations, which Levy will talk about in more detail in the next slide. Solar and gardening. We have actually converted one of our choir rooms now to a hydroponics learning lab with New York Sunworks, which we'll talk a little bit about, but kind of the hands-on experience, the community experience, and then what's really important to our school as well is the outdoor education, that understanding that learning doesn't just happen in the four walls of any school, but learning happens outside of the schools. And so that might be with a community partner, that might be with a club or after school activity, but how do we bring the things they learn inside outside, and how do we bring the outside learning inside? And so all of these organizations kind of touch on some of our goals and mission as we convert to our new name and theme and honor that.
Great. So while Steve was talking, I counted the number of bullet points. There are 24 organizations here with whom we've had conversations so far. To make this more tangible, our next few slides go through specific partnerships and what we've done as a school with each of those groups. So the first one is Citizens Climate Lobby. I had heard about them, and so I joined their mailing list, I think back in maybe February or March, and I joined one of their meetings just to see what a Citizens Climate Lobby do. Ended up emailing with Mark Cesari, who's one of the volunteers there, and he actually connected us with the Climate Interactive, which you see a screenshot here. It is an awesome tool that has a huge amount of mathematical modeling underneath it, basically to predict how certain policy changes will affect the amount of temperature rise our climate is likely to experience by 2100. And so the CCL, the Citizens Climate Lobby team, came into our green team, hosted a Model UN style climate game after school. And then in May, our science department expanded it. And so now every student in our school has done this mock Model UN style experience with the climate game. So that was a really great partnership.
So one of the other partnerships we are working with is EEAC. And Taylor, who's the Director of Environmental Health and Ed, has been working with the administrators right now, and we're planning a summer summit for our staff and student leaders, particularly on the Green Team, Student Council, who will help push forward around the advocacy, lobbying, and justice piece. And so they're planning externally to come in and work with the staff to build the capacity, and then we're going to kind of build that out into our 9th grade seminar. So EEAC will be kind of integrated into our curriculum, and then also using them as a support for all of the research and work that they've already been doing.
Great. And then New York Sunworks is another one. Sarah told me that a previous EEAC had Sunworks. They're a wonderful partner. We got connected through a DOE. We'd applied for the DOE sustainability grant, and we really wanted to do take-home hydroponics. That was what my green team students wanted, right? I'm their advisor, not their director. So they said they wanted take-home hydroponics, and I went crazy finding a place that did it. And we found it through Sunworks, and then through talking to them, realized that they would be a great partner as well for our emerging hydroponics curriculum and equipment. And so we're now working with them both for the take-home hydroponics as well as our hydroponics lab. Grow NYC is another one. So one of our teachers, Ms. Kance Durand, met Grow NYC at a DOE sustainability webinar, and they've been doing basically a seminar with our 9th grade classes. There were 4 sessions. The last one was today on food and sustainability, and it was incredible. I learned a ton.
So for time purposes, I'll just say we partnered with the Ed project, who's also now focusing not just on history, but the environment.
So how do we fund our partnerships? Because that's always a question, you know, where's the money come from? I don't hold the purse strings. Steve and our principal Swanson do, but the number one thing is a lot of organizations don't need your money. They've got outside grants or they're volunteer run. There are so many people who are so excited about climate because it's so important that it's not a part of any initial conversation. The initial conversation is, should we partner, not where's the money going to come from. If the organization doesn't have their own money, there are grants, there are prizes, there are donations, and there's money in school's budget. So I would say, at least in my experience, it's the money conversation is secondary to finding the right partner. You agree, Steve? Steve's nodding.
Yeah, definitely.
what makes it hard? There are just so many resources. So many resources. Everyone's doing great things. And it's everyone's trying to bring everything together. There's no person who's in charge. And so when it comes to really the great work that environmental groups are doing, it's great to have groups like the EEAC, right? The places that bring the things together so that people can connect and form those partnerships. Anything you'd add on this slide?
Yeah, I would just say that also we've kind of come up to a lot of the government agencies and orgs don't talk to each other always. And so sometimes as we're kind of talking about, oh yeah, we partnered with the New York City Parks, or we're talking, I am a social studies teacher prior to being an AP and worked with Civics for All. And then the New York City Sustainability Department was like, oh, I would love to work with it. And they're part of the same DOE, but those departments don't kind of talk and they're doing the same work. So it just kind of makes it hard because we're having to cast that wide net, but there's some great resources. It goes back to bullet number 1. All right.
All right.
So
You can stop share and then, oh, you guys do have more. I thought you guys
I
were
just have,
wrapping up.
I think we have 2 more. Just
You have
advice
plenty
for
of time.
schools in particular is really make use of your personal connections. We found that our teachers really know a lot of people. And those networks spawned off to other networks of people who know each other. Building partnerships based on enthusiasm, Levy mentioned that. Don't let the funding drive, let the enthusiasm and connection drive. Know which staff member, and this is, I think, is key as an administrator. So if we're gonna sustain a partnership, you have to have someone to be the face and be that point person for that partnership, or it will drop. And so they have to also be willing and able to do the work. Getting students to drive the process. Levy's amazing at that with her green team. I will just say, because I run the social media, I've also found talking about the partnerships with the partners, they really appreciate that we shout them out, or we take pictures of the things we're doing with their resources or while they're there on Zoom, because not only does it help my community understand the benefits of the partnership for orgs that they don't know, it also helps the partner organization with exposure that leads to potential funding and all the other kind of things that happen when you find out that you're partnered with people. And then obviously never stop emailing. Being persistent is key in anything we do, but building partnerships as well. So I'll just real quick then, our next steps for us, especially like for you as network, maybe you want to help us and join and we'll work. But we are having summer task forces that specifically address aspects of our new school theme, building staff capacity around that foundational climate justice content in language. In other words, we're not requiring our teachers to be experts. We can't. We all have different fields, but we do want to come with a foundational knowledge that we're using the same language in the school to support our students as they graduate. Continue expanding the green team and student advocacy, and obviously developing that school-wide interdisciplinary work. It started already. We're gonna, as admin, we're supporting that. And then just real quick, Levy, do you wanna just talk about the 9th grade piece? Because that's huge.
Yeah, sure. It's going to be a full course all 9th graders take, which is climate justice. What is it? Why is it important? How do we do it? How do I do it, right? Getting something personally meaningful, field trips, etc. And there's a group of us planning that over the summer. Again, partnering with the organizations you saw before. There's great curricula out there, right? It's a borrow, don't recreate the wheel here.
Great. And then, so in other words, we're really just trying to learn, utilize, and strength in terms of our growing, with our community partnerships. The things we're trying to do next will not happen without community partnerships. And so that's kind of what we're trying to do.
Yeah. On that theme, right? Follow us on Instagram and Twitter. We are 16 days away from the official name change to the High School for Climate Justice. So if you follow us on Instagram and Twitter now, you'll be one of the first for our Climate NYC. Yeah, it's exciting. Partnership's really all about just finding people, and it's I think I put this in the Menti meter at the beginning, like both sides benefit, right? We cannot produce a bunch of students who are going to fix our climate problem if it's just us teachers and administrators in the building. And partners are always looking for young folks who want to get involved and want to learn and spend energy. So it's absolutely mutually beneficial. Questions?
Thank you so much. I'm very inspired by all the work you're doing with the school. I'm personally very inspired by your switch over to becoming the High School for Climate Justice. And, you know, your list of partners is amazing. A lot of favorites on there of mine. And also, you know, I think I really appreciate some of the tips and guidance you gave around, you know, your process for identifying and building partnerships in a way that is like really organized and systematic. And I've never even thought about it that way, but it's so much smarter. And, you know, I appreciate you mentioning funding as well. It's something that, you know, for me coming from a nonprofit, that's always a big question, is how do we get the funding to pay our staff to do the work? And there are a lot of grants and there's a lot of different ways to collaborate. And I just really appreciate centering the partnership goals and the collaboration first. It's like a really good thing to step back and think about. I'm wondering, I want to open up the floor to questions. I have a question, but I want to see if anyone else has questions first.
I have a question. Alyssa and Stephen, how do you guys work with universities and academic institutions? I feel like you have such an ecosystem, right? And, you know, Columbia's nearby, City College of New York, New School. Just wondering if they're kind of in your roster of partnerships.
Not currently. It definitely is on our radar, but I know there's a lot of groups out there, like youth groups. By youth, I mean college youth, doing some of the similar work. But no, we don't have any major partnerships just yet with either professors or departments.
But we are open to recommendations.
I wish Mary was here. We one of our steering committee members is from the Wallerstein Collaborative at NYU. They have very cool programs. And New School, I see.
Yeah, that's great.
New School is amazing. That's a great point. I was wondering, as you think about curriculum development specifically, this can be, I really appreciated what you said about not recreating things from scratch, but how do you work to piece together components of curriculum from different organizations? You know, this is something that fascinates me as an outside curriculum person. Like, how do you put those things together as teachers and experts?
Yeah, I actually spent a good hour yesterday with Ben Otto, who'll be one of the main teachers of our 9th grade climate seminar on this very question, because so many full sets of curricula exist. And where we landed was it starts with the teacher who's teaching it. So you can plan out a course, but the course isn't meaningful if it doesn't have the joy and the soul of the person. And so his approach, the way he wants to teach it next year, is you go by themes. So like maybe there's a hurricane unit and there's Sandy and there's Katrina, and everything gets pulled in and the aspects of all the components, right, tied to that. Whereas another one might do it through like one lens is water and one lens is fire. I am a physics and computer science teacher. That's too fluffy for me. Like, I'm like, all right, what's the science? Like, we're going to do the energy and we're going to do the math, and then we're going to do the like data. And so it's really like, I think it has to be teacher driven, and you kind of poke around at different curricula and pull the pieces that will be the most passionate course that can personally be taught. I don't know, Sterling, would you add anything?
No, for sure. And I think there's just backwards design around that as well. It's kind of what are you trying to accomplish in the course? And then you kind of piecemeal it together, which I don't think is inappropriate. We can use different resources and we can be okay with that. And then also, you know, we find that there's some different resources that offer either depth or critique. And that's okay for students to see as well, to grapple with.
Can I say something? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Hi, Mike.
Yeah, hi, how you doing? You know, EEAC has a syllabi bank in which college teachers have submitted courses that are generally for teachers to teach prospective teachers about the environment, about different issues. However, some of those courses probably might be helpful to you as you develop your syllabus, especially one from Cornell, which is specifically on climate. So I would suggest, you know, you just go to the EEAC website and click into syllabi bank, and you'll see there are 10 courses there, including the one from Cornell on climate. And then you can decide which ones might be helpful to you.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
That's a good point. Thanks for the reminder about the syllabi bank, Mike.
And just, I want to say one piece other with Sarah's question is that we have to recognize that we have students coming from different abilities. And so using different texts, using different resources, you know, you can then differentiate. So keeping open rather than just going to one set curriculum is often helpful, because sometimes the curriculum that is boxed doesn't necessarily meet the needs of all of our students. And so we can do certain things with, you know, a potpourri.
That's great. That's good to know. That's always what I'm hopeful that, you know, teachers will be able to spend the time doing that. And I could probably keep going with questions about curriculum development and what formats work best, but I don't want to take up too much time on that. Does anyone else have any final questions for either our presenters? I want to say thank you to both of you for sharing information about High School for Climate Justice. I think you might have some new partners just from this event today, emailing you. I'm pretty sure about that, actually. And I also want to thank Anna, still here, and Judah, who had to run, but for both of you being here. And then just open it up one more time to questions, and then we are going to share a little bit about EEAC and have a group discussion. So any final questions for our presenters?
I have a somewhat of a selfish question. So I am an outside partner coming into schools a lot, and I'm just curious about for next year, are you thinking that outside presenters would be able to meet with your students in person next year, or are you planning for more virtual beginning of the year next year?
So as of right now, we are supposed to be back. De Blasio did say that at least New York City public schools will be going back 5 days a week in person. There will not be a virtual option for those students. Now, who knows what summer brings, if there's a variant, of course. But as of right now, we'll be back and welcoming you and others into our building. Yeah, in person. I mean, I really do think that's important. I can't speak for all schools, but our school in particular, our student population really benefits from in-person learning, being able to kind of interact with our staff and you know, so that's our hope. In Cuomo, it happened, I believe, just, you know, lifted most restrictions today. So we'll wait for city guidance, of course, but yep.
Yeah. Cool.
Not a selfish question. We want you guys back.
I also have a bit of a selfish question. I'm really interested in understanding, you know, there's so much anxiety around climate. So I wonder how you're engaging the students, or are there any like mental health components to the curriculum, or like how are you grappling with kind of the effects of, especially since I'm, in 96th Street, you guys have a lot of northern Manhattan kids probably who are dealing with heat island effect, are kind of on the front lines of climate change.
Yeah, dispositions to health. Yeah. So the short answer is no, not currently. But the longer answer is that at our school within the equity team, we have built in to our school culture what's called the courageous conversations of race. And so our students and our staff participate. And so we have literal conversations around race all the time with protocols that kind of grapple with the question, Anna, that you're mentioning. It's usually focused on race, but certainly because we have the protocols and the culture of communication around, the trauma of climate chaos, that those conversations will continue and broaden from race to a lot of the things that they'll be exposed to within the curriculum and presenters and such. So that's a little longer answer. I don't know, Levy, if you want to mention.
It's been an interesting experience spending the past 2 months talking about climate change with my 9th grade students. More than half of them had never heard of it. Like global warming, like maybe they had heard of it, but didn't know what it was. Climate change was not a familiar term. They had never heard of the greenhouse effect. And so we really dove into the science, and we're using our concepts of energy in our physics class and like looking at data and saying, oh gosh, like this thing is real. And then we talk about why, how is it? They say to me, Miss Levy, if this problem is such a big deal, how come I've never heard of it? I'm like, that's a really great question. And then you get the anxiety. And so I read student assignments, and it's like, wait, well, now that I know about this, I already knew about all this horribleness in the world, and now you're adding climate to the list. And so I think, Anna, the answer to your question is like, to the extent that climate anxiety is the thing you're specifically getting at, it hasn't been much of a conversation because we're only just becoming the high school for climate justice. And as students develop a deeper understanding of this problem, I suspect we will also need to deepen our emotional support of how to grapple with it.
Yeah. And we do have a task force that specifically is socio-emotional support that we created, during the COVID epidemic. So, that we also have those supports ready to go. But you're bringing up a great point.
And that's actually a perfect segue into our final closing discussion, which we'll just have for a little bit, and hopefully we can harness some of the ideas of this group here today. But building on what I said earlier, how can collaboration and partnership help us to address pressing global problems like the climate crisis, like climate justice? And building on that, what can we do as EEAC, as a member organization, volunteer-based, but really a network trying to bring together educators and really anyone interested in environmental education to promote this type of work, to promote collaboration and not be duplicating efforts of others. That was another big thing that you guys brought up in your presentation is there's lots of groups, there's lots of silos, people doing the same thing at the same time. How do we reduce that? So I'd love to have a group discussion. I would say with the size of this group, I think we can have a little bit of a popcorn conversation. I'd love for people to just jump in with ideas, either in the chat or right live on the screen. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. How do we collaborate more to address these issues, and what can EEAC do to promote that type of work?
One thing that I would, is our website, the EEAC website is really, coming to fruition. I think I'm just wondering whether it can be a vehicle that is available to the entire environmental ed community to promote the partnerships, that are out there, and to try to stimulate new ones.
I wonder if you guys do kind of like a matchmaking. So I think, having a roster, and it's hard because I think partnerships and collaboration is so much about those personal relationships and building that trust. I think that's just building off of Rise's work and learning from how the Rise has worked over the decades. It's like very much like it's just built into the culture, and there's constantly a roster of collaborators that are just, they change from year to year, but they're constantly getting engaged. So it's like helping organizations or the people within the EAC community build those relationships, and kind of, playing matchmaker. So I don't know.
Maybe one of our next events should be an EEAC speed dating with schools and partners.
There you go.
I know a ton of schools that would sign up for that.
And I think,
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, you go.
Go ahead.
I also know, it's difficult with researchers, because I know there's a ton of researchers who want to work with youth, but obviously there's parameters. You have to go through the institutional review boards. So if there might be, if there's like a pre-approved institutional review board through EEAC that works with these partners, it helps, High School for Climate Justice to work with New School on this research project, like a collaborative community participatory action research project, right? So that those kind of little ways of like helping to bridge those bureaucracies might be a really great avenue too. And then
No, go ahead, Anna. You finish up.
No, but then you have like a roster of researchers that are like so eager to work with you because you have like the students and they have the research project, right?
Yeah, just to piggyback on Anna's comments, Levy actually works with a group called TEALS, Microsoft TEALS, which is a computer science organization. And they have volunteers who are in the field, be it Amazon, Google, and other tech industries that come work with students. They help facilitate the DOE bureaucracy around their TEALS volunteers. And so they already come presented with the credentials of, the background check of the fingerprints and such. And then as an administrator, all I have to do is just have a copy of that documentation, and I can put it into my Galaxy, which is the DOE system, as a volunteer that's allowed into the building and work directly with students. So you could have presenters come in anytime, but if you want them to work directly with students on a regular basis, there is a process for that, and it's doable.
Jay, I think you were going to say something.
Yeah, there's been a couple of things that popped into my head around the speed dating kind of concept. The NYU Expo is a really great opportunity to do some speed dating. Not specifically structured for that, but lots of groups and lots of opportunities to chat. And the tools of EEAC, for me, it's always been the listserv. Questions pop up, on a Tuesday, or whatever. And sometimes there's an immediate need for a response, and the listserv does that. And the community that's on there is very helpful. And thinking about the history of EEAC, Mike probably can chime in a lot on this, but I first joined, I guess, in the 90s. And at that point, things were towards more of not-for-profit people were on the committees and stuff. It was less or fewer teachers kind of. I felt like the sense I got was that early on EEAC was more of a teacher membership. I don't know, maybe Mike knows more about that, but I'm not sure what our current membership is like. You know, is it more teachers or more, you know, informal educators? I think there's room for more teachers and making those connections would be easier. You know, we're here waiting, you know, and so when we do PD, I work at the Museum of Natural History, EEAC pops up, you know, as an opportunity for teachers to network with some of the service providers around.
I think in the mid 70s, mid 80s, there were more teachers, and it was a better balance of teachers and non-formal educators. There was also a fair number of college teachers involved, of which we still have some,
Yeah.
but not as many as we had back then.
Yeah.
I do feel like doing some matchmaking where matchmaking is the intent of the meeting could be a great recruitment tool for schools and teachers, especially if we could, you know, I think there's a lot of, I would say, government agency representation in EEAC, university representation, and nonprofit. And I feel like a lot of those organizations do have funding for free programs often, sometimes have paid, sometimes are looking for schools with funding to support stuff, but there's also free stuff. And I bet that could be one way we could increase engagement from schools and get more schools to join, but also getting to the heart of the goal of this, which is like, how do we address these big issues? How do we reduce, you know, the duplicative efforts and really connect people who have the same goals? I feel like that would really help us achieve that in a really big way. It's very helpful.
One of the things that to think about is, you know, I work with the Urban Advantage program, which is a middle school science program. We've got 8 cultural institutions. We've got 230 schools and 900 teachers, you know, and when we go to places like the National Science Teachers Conference and we say those words in public, you know, other states go, we don't have that many schools in our state, you know. The New York City educational system is just so huge that can lead to some challenges, but you know, there's opportunity there.
It's both a challenge and an opportunity.
Yeah.
There's no reason all the partner organizations shouldn't be able to work with schools.
Find some partners.
Yeah, for sure. I don't want to keep people too late, but I do want to share a little bit more about EEAC. And I'm actually hoping that we can, Fran, maybe you could put the slide up, and I was hoping, River, you could lead us through this final closing slide just to talk a little bit more about EEAC and the mission of EEAC for those of you who are not familiar with us, and our new website, which is awesome. And we're hoping to create a space on our website to be a hub for matchmaking and curriculum and bringing a lot of environmental groups together.
Yes. So yeah, thank you all for being here and presenting. My name is River DeLeo, and I am the chair of EEAC, and I'm also the regional environmental educator for New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. So that's my day job, and my volunteer work is with EEAC. So there's some new exciting parts of the EEAC website. So on the slide, you can see on the left-hand side that professional learning opportunity link is a spot where if your organization is offering professional development for teachers, there's a form that you can fill out once you click that link to add your information to a database. And then that database is then searchable by anybody who comes to the EEAC website. This is not something that is only for members. Anybody can submit a listing into the database, and any teacher can then, or informal educator can then click through the database and find organizations that are offering professional development. So that's something that we invite you to explore on our website. And membership link is also there on the left-hand side. And membership is $30 for an individual. It is $10 if you are a student, and there is an option for an organization to become a member. And under the organizational membership, there can be 5 folks who work at that organization who are then covered by that membership. And I believe that's $75 a year. And what that gives you access to are a few members only events that happen, but the big part is that listserv that Jay was talking about is for EEAC members. And that's a really great place where people are posting resumes and connecting to jobs in the field, and also posting jobs, and just posting questions. Does anybody know about the turkey population on Staten Island these days, or something like that? And there's just really great conversations that are happening there every day. And following EEAC on social media, you'll find the links to all of that if you scroll down on the page. So that's EEAC. And then we also have lots of opportunities to volunteer. So if you are working with folks who want to dip their toes into the environmental education field, working with EEAC is a really great way to do that. Our steering committee represents a ton of different environmental organizations in the city. And there's opportunities to be out front talking to people, hosting programs, working on programs. That's what Sarah does. There's opportunities to be more in the background. We're looking for tech folks and website folks and writers and editors for a blog that we're launching. So there's lots of opportunities to volunteer. I will drop the email in the chat that you should reach out to for all of that. But yeah, I think that's all that I have to share. Join EEAC if you have not already.
Thank you, River. And I also want to shout out Fran, who's been managing all of the tech and slides and organizing this event. Fran, you're my hero. Also, I see I hope Fran is taking notes. We're going to capture all these and summarize them and probably do a little post-event follow-up to the whole EEAC community, just to share not only the recording of our discussion today, but also some of the great ideas that we generated. And I see, yeah, a resource here for Lamont Doherty. Yeah, they're the best.
Yeah, I didn't see him on your list, but could be a cool resource.
Definitely a cool resource. We should add that. Does anybody have any closing thoughts, comments, or questions? Okay. Thank you all. Reach out to us, eeac.info.